there, Zinners. It's Adam Knox, and welcome to another episode of The Cult of You. It is the month of June 2021, and it is a prediction episode. Today, we chat again to Bill Duvendack to chat about the upcoming month's astrological significances and changes. I want you to pay attention to this month's episode, whether you're catching it when it's coming out or were you catching it at another point. And the reason for that is because besides looking at these essential predictions of what's actually going to happen in this month from an astrological point, we discuss the retrogrades, Saturn, Jupiter, as well as Mercury. We look at, on top of that, we look at the solstices and the hidden significance behind the winter and summer solstice as it occurs not only in its relative location of celebration, but inside of our own lives. On top of that, we deep dive into some very interesting subjects, including spiritual technologies, dualism, and many others. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. And remember, live deliciously. Bo, welcome to another month of our Zodiac session. I'm so glad to have you again. How have you been doing?
I've been doing good. I've been doing good. It's good to see you and connect again for the upcoming month.
Yeah, I feel like this is an important one because, when we finished up last month, you kind of gave us a little bit of a highlight of what was coming up with the retrograde and with the eclipse. And it's been quite interesting. I've been very actively watching some of the forums and people that I've known, their dramas, everything from accidents in terms of technology, cars to communications gone wrong. And my only advice for people is just go watch the previous episode, and you'll get a bit of something to navigate it with, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Everything that's coming up is stuff that needs dealt with. So, yeah, you can get upset about it, but it's still there to be dealt with. And it's a reminder, don't get irresponsible.
Yes, yes. I think that's the big thing because people are always like, oh, this is, it's a retrograde coming up or something like that. Um, and then they start freaking out, like I want to kind of like batten down their hatches instead of going, okay, you're in the left hand or you're in an intense path of magic. Because to me, magic itself, the practice of it is technically in a way sort of left hand. It's not you're not giving up the power, you're taking ownership, you're taking authority, and that means you're supposed to embrace it instead of, and like I think that's one of the things that I hope for a lot of people, we've been able to impart with your ideas and your concepts that's been brought through these episodes is, yes, that's the energy going on, but what's the deeper lesson? It's kind of like Buddha that sees Kali as Ma Kali instead of just the goddess of destruction, for as it is for other people.
Right, right. And that's an important thing about astrology in general is that it's a spectrum. So you'll understand something on the surface like a Mercury retrograde, and then the deeper level would be realizing that this is stuff that you just need to deal with because it's unresolved. And then the deeper level is the reminder to constantly be responsible. And when things come up, don't get emotionally attached because it needs dealt with.
I find that's almost like because I always say when the idea of priesthood kind of comes up in discussion, I say that I have a bit of a different viewpoint of priesthood. I mean, yes, there is the entering a coven or a group or an order or something and getting an initiation into that role, but then it's more like an office that you carry for a period of time. Whereas to me, true priesthood is almost to say that there's kind of when we learn a new art, like if I'm learning the arts or I'm learning technology, there's that 10,000 hours of just mastery. And that's almost like the first step. That's learning the limits of that field. And only once I've understood the limits of the field, then I move into artistry. And artistry is now when I'm expanding beyond the limits. I'm breaking the rules of what everyone thought was possible in that field. And that's artistry. And then above that, to me, is priesthood. Priesthood is now when you're literally the innovator or the voice of that spectrum of human experience. And that's often what we would describe a leader. So to me, Tesla, an Elon Musk is a better representative of Mercury almost in terms of technology aspects than, some guy in a hippie pagan outfit that just, got slapped on the head by a priest. But I think one of the things that's very helpful here is to realize that, when we talk about Mercury, they're not just necessarily that straightforward cut as just technology.
Right, exactly. And that's something that Crowley talked about in some of his writings, where he said that he would do the writing, he would do the prep work, and then he would do his most powerful evocation of a spirit of Mercury and call a publisher.
Yes.
Because the publisher is the embodiment of the spirit of Mercury.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
So you've got that same thinking that is now permeating occultism, where a spirit of Mercury does not have to be a non-physical spirit. It can be a dude like Musk, Bill Gates, and that does cross into that line of priesthood because you're living it in alignment.
That's great. I think it's and this is something that another practitioner reminded me of the other day, because I was talking about how deeply I see the psychological dimension or the immediate practical dimension of this. And we've had the discussion as well before about are the gods real or are they imaginary, and kind of question is, why can't they be both? Kind of, why can't it be a psychological event and a real event? Why does it have to be one or the other? And he highlighted an old classical kabalistic idea, again, the realm of Azai, of the Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut. And it's true. It's just these multiple layers of truth. So that there's, even if we talk about Mercury, there's the definite psychological, practical, behavioral, economical manifestation of it in the realm of Azai, the physical realm of it. But then there's also the Yetziratic kind of element, what's going on in the astral, the subconscious, the things that we are not aware of necessarily, or, that are behind the force that doesn't necessarily have a voice yet. It's in that kind of manifestation bridge. And I think that's an interesting idea here. But before I dive too deep into that, because I want to come back to that, but I don't want to keep everyone waiting, because I know everyone tuned in because they want to get the prediction, the awareness of the month. So before we go into the juicier topics, Bill, give us the down and dirty. What are we up for?
Well, so first of all, this has been talked about a lot in astrological circles. And that's just the fact that this is going to be a potentially chaotic up and down month.
Okay.
We just had an eclipse. The Mercury retrograde just started, along with the Saturn retrograde. We've got another eclipse coming up on the 10th.
Oh, wow.
And the difference between the two is the eclipse on the 10th is more likely to produce external situations to deal with, where the previous eclipse was all about internal realizations. This one's going to be more about actual events happening. So when you connect the dots, the events that happen are going to happen during a Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
So they're going to force confrontation. They're going to force coming to terms with things.
Okay.
And then later on in the month, on the 24th, we've got the next supermoon.
Oh.
And in between the 10th and the 24th, and even shortly before the 10th, we've got Venus changing signs, we've got Mars changing signs, we've got Jupiter going retrograde.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be a very turbulent roller coaster kind of month.
What does that mean? If you had to kind of put that into a painting, how would you describe that?
Think of it like, a roller coaster is the best example. Think of it like the roller coaster is getting ready to go up the big hill come down and then do one of those weird twists before it goes down and then comes back up. So a lot of these themes are going to have to do with the self, your masculine side, your feminine side, your ability to adapt, your ability to communicate, but also knowing where your limits are.
Okay. All right.
Because Jupiter is all about expansion. So when it goes retrograde, it's time to review and change things up.
Okay, so this is almost like a cue to almost, I don't want to use the term be realistic, but it is an honest measure of where you actually are, to be careful of inflated communication, so to speak. And we're kind of, if we looked at where I'm interpreting this, is we've had that kind of internal set of shifts that started with the initial kind of eclipse and that initial kind of retrograde, and also the retrogrades around Mercury, which is against this intellectual, conversational communication thing, which to a degree can be quite inflated in certain areas where I'm idealizing things and I think I've made the speculative plans of what should be done, versus now with this coming down to the physical degree, the second eclipse, where I'm kind of come face to face with, has it really, what is the stuff that I may have actually overlooked or not calculated because I was caught up in my delusion, my idealized version of reality and of situations. I'm going to have to face that now. And it is going to be a communication shift. And that may be a change in my leadership tactic. I may have to review how I lead my life and lead my direction, but it's going to also be from a more realistic and more grounded point of view, coming from that point. Am I correct?
Exactly. And another way to look at it would be to follow your line of thinking about the four Kabbalistic worlds. The last 2 weeks of May were all about the formation on the astral plane. And now June is going to be that coming down into the physical plane.
Okay. All right.
So you're going to be tested on what you believe and what you figured out, like you were just talking about.
Yes.
And that really ties into one of the 12 laws of karma, which is as soon as you profess you believe something to be true, you will be tested on that by the universe.
Oh, that's juicy. That's juicy. That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. I mean, like if I'm looking at this from my point of view, now you've known a little bit more about my personal projects and things like that. And there was a project of alignment that I've been working on, which has been personal goals of products that I wanted to create. And I've been aligned with clients to help me create products similar. But now I'm also seeing how inside of that, not to be just completely sidetracked with my own kind of vision, but that's now coming to a point where it's materializing and looking at its almost practical realization. I need to look at where I was going, it's what I've been creating, but now I'm faced with the reality of the situation and how to align accordingly to go past and make that kind of essential transition, so to speak. It's very, very key then that we have all this moon activity. There are these eclipses, the up and coming super moon, because this is very reflective of that dimension of the human psyche, is it not?
Exactly. Yeah. And, at one point during June, we will have Saturn retrograde, Mars retrograde, Mercury retrograde. So 3 of the 5 possible retrograde or 3 of the 5 possible personal planets will be retrograde. So approximately right around solstice in late June, it's going to be a time of internal changes. It's going to be a time of saying, okay, between the end of May and now, I've had 3 weeks to see all this stuff that's come up. Where do I go from here?
Sure. It's a hectic transition month, but also what seems to be quite a critical position for a lot of people in changes of what needs to occur. Kind of a letting go of what doesn't work, finding actively what does work. But let's step into that, because we're not just getting all this deep activity with the retrogrades, which is quite hectic, alongside the eclipse, alongside the supermoon, but now we have the solstices as well on the way. Okay, so it's the summer.
Yeah, and the solstice should not be understated.
Yes.
You know, solstice, the summer solstice, regardless of where you are on the planet, is when the sun is at the zenith in the sky.
Okay.
The winter solstice is when it's at its lowest point in the sky.
All right.
So we look at that astronomically, and that's the way it is. But from a transpersonal perspective, then if you're in the north and it's summer solstice, it also encourages you to look at how high you can fly.
Yeah.
So, of course, people should cut that with the lesson of Icarus. And then the winter solstice is how low can you go? And both of these thoughts should be tempered with the Hermetic axiom. Well, not the Hermetic axiom, it's been brought over into Hermeticism, but the Oracle of Delphi phrase of know thyself.
Mm. Mm.
So coming up in June is a real good time to know thyself, because you set these plans and you take a review in May and you think you know where you're going. Then the 3 weeks in June that lead up to the solstice is the universe and divinity testing you to see if you can fly as high as you said you could, or sink as low as you said you can. And pretty much, the people that check these out are stubborn, willful people. So they're probably thinking, I can go as high as it takes. No, that's true of all of us. We all have limits and we have to know them, because working within them is how we breed success.
Correct. In fact, it's probably
we should push our limits, but we should also know our breaking points.
Yes.
Because there is such a thing as a Pyrrhic victory or a Pyrrhic victory, where we win, but at what cost? We have nothing to win over. It's all a kingdom of ash.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I think one of the concepts around money making or wealth building or creation of absolutely anything, it is actually the art of limiting. You're limiting an infinite idea or an infinite set of directions down into a single one, so you can start taking action on it, or you can start building it, and you're refining and you're perfecting that, as opposed to the constant expansion, the constantly going higher and never kind of getting down to that action field. It seems almost like it's that universal alignment then of the solar and the lunar on the two distant hemispheres, where on one hand we're kind of being asked to really evaluate realistically our higher direction, our ultimate kind of gestalt of where we want to be and go with our lives, in conjunction to realistically where we're at and what needs to be changed at a behavioral and core level of myself. And I'm putting that to kind of test now. And I have a choice. I can kind of sit and I can whine about it, but these things are happening regardless. Or again, like as we've spoken about in previous episodes, I can be open and willing for the pain. I can be open to what's coming, in which case it's going to be easier. I'm going to see the punch when it comes, instead of kind of flinching and missing and getting hit as a result of it. So it's not a your fate is sealed. It's these are the transitions. You can align yourself for it. But that kind of makes me curious, especially given this kind of solstice energy, because there's a lot of deeper meaning behind these events historically, in terms of what they represent. Can you touch on maybe a few of those? If we look at, for example, the summer solstice first, for those on that side of the world, and how that was the hidden lesson inside of that for this transition.
Well, summer solstice, since summer solstice is when the sun is highest in the sky, it's all about peak manifestation, shining your best and your brightest. For example, when people get married, if you're young, you should probably get married in spring because that aligns with where you're at in life. You're still growing, you're still opening up. So you get that youthful building energy in the relationship. When you do something during the summer, it's like you're saying, I'm shining my best and my brightest. Here I am. This is the maximum of what I've got to give, and this is the maximum of how it will manifest.
All right. Okay.
So summer solstice, other than being the feast day of Anubis, is a good time to work on shining your best and your brightest. It's a good time to welcome maximum amounts of light. It's a good time to step into the spotlight. It's a good time to shine and say, here I am. This is what I can do.
That's a very interesting idea, especially I think a lot of newcomers to the left-hand path are very instantly obsessed with the concept of darkness and very easily overwhelmed with it. Yet a lot of archetypes are actually symbolic of light. For example, Lucifer, in essence. Can you touch on that interpretation? How some people may kind of get lost because they're trying to avoid one religion's concept of light and love and all that good. How does one strike the balance? Because I think that's very key to this kind of transition.
So the key is to remove self-imposed dogma. And this is something that drives me batshit crazy with a lot of people I see. They'll say, I'm a Luciferian, and then you'll see their videos on YouTube, and it's nothing but a temple space that is completely draped in black with small candles. That's as anti-Luciferian as you can get.
Yes, exactly.
The name is in the title. It's right there. It's Lucifer. It's light. If you can't see that if you're going to work with Lucifer, you should be welcoming as much light into your space as possible. If you can't see that, you've got a whole bunch of prep work to do before you get to that point. The problem is a lot of people are conditioned that if right-hand paths are solar in nature, then left-hand paths should be lunar in nature. And for some of that, that's true. But with certain deities, you've got to look at the fact that if they correspond to light, you better learn to live with the light.
Yes.
Another tangent of this is the same light that causes plants to grow will also burn you to death in the desert.
Oh, wow. Good point. Good point.
So you can welcome light in, but remember that the light can burn. So you should expect to get bathed in light and any impurities flamed away. And that's one of the things that alchemists talked about all the time: purification through fire, purification through flame. Light is heat. Yes. Now, once you leave the planet, light is no longer heat. But here on Earth, light is heat.
But that's a very good point. It's there's this overemphasis of it being positive or good versus dark, which is also quite false. It's the yin yang kind of philosophy, that in every light there's a bit of darkness. That same light that can comfort you can also burn you. And the same thing with the darkness as well. Like there can be these extremes to it, and the balance is still kind of necessary. And again, you're right in terms of the confusion, because there's the one is very solar based, the other one's very lunar based. But if you forget about it, it's the development of the solar and the lunar body. Each of them has a space inside the development of the occult path. We need to ultimately, if we want to attain ascension, we need to master or cultivate both. We can't just be truly fulfilled with only the one. The one will give you a lot of vision and direction maybe for your life, but not the ability to materialize it. Versus the other one can give you all that power, but not if you're being run by these dogmas and these programs inside of yourself. And I think that's that's the funny thing that I tend to see is you see people that, they're rebelling against one religion or one group or one practice, and then they end up becoming that same practice just on the other side.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is you get people that say, well, if right-hand paths or Abrahamic faiths are all solar phallic in nature and I'm rebelling against them, then I have to become lunar yoni.
Mm.
No, you don't.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
No, you're thinking that way because spiritually you're an adolescent.
Mm.
The spiritually mature person will say, well, the bigger thrill is working with that light anyway and turning it to my own end.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, it's part of the lessons of Samael, the poison of God.
Mm.
It's part of the mindset of a vaccine. You get injected a little bit with the whatever you want to protect yourself from, so your body builds up an immunity. It's the
Exactly.
same model of thinking and thought processes behind it all. And during June, regardless of where you're at on the planet, it's a good time to think about how you relate to light, how you get along with light. What is your thoughts? You know, in the southern hemisphere, it's winter solstice. So the sun's at the lowest point of the sky. So minimum light is coming in. So then during those periods of darkness in your life, how do you work with light when there's no light coming in?
And I think that's so key because I think a nice kind of mask or correlation of Lucifer is also that of Melech Taus, and the peacock angel, but also like the rainbow, in the sense of we have the light. The fallen light is literally the light that comes down into the chrysalis and then gives us the rays of the rainbow, which is in essence the planets, and the chakras. And then out of that, those blendings of energies where we get the kind of zodiac, we get into this hierarchical components from. And that's again how we talk about the 12, we talked about Yule, and you talk about the winter solstice, and there we have the 12 nights of Yule, which is again was I'm outside of that peak, I'm outside of that relationship, I'm almost dissecting, I'm breaking apart piece by piece each component of how that ray of light materializes in these different aspects of my life, to alchemically go through that negrido, albedo, rubedo process, where I'm taking each of those. And I love the old kind of traditional view where what you did over those 12 nights was almost what was going to predict the next 12 months. It's that cycle, it's that cyclical way. It fits in actually so beautifully with what we've spoken about with this transition that's happening. With you're going to have to face reality now. You're going to come to terms with what's really going on in terms of your ultimate path, the vision of your higher self, your higher daemon, however you want to, perceive that level. I'm kind of giving a sneak peek into our conversation from next month, because next month I want us to hit your book, your up and coming book, which is about Enochian magic. But there's one thing that you highlight inside of that, which is this concept of the tetragrammaton, and how you have that choice of, you could see this as the god, and you can be stuck inside of that model and you can't use that because it's Abrahamic, or you can simply look at it as a spiritual technology, and this is so true in my experience as well. And I'm completely in resonance with what you said there, that it's a technology that is truly across all the paths. It is, if you're really going to break that principle down and you look at it purely from the principle point of view, it's kind of like guilty by association, how Western men think orgasm and ejaculation is the same event, but they're not. They're two separate things. You've just been conditioned to it being the same. And the same thing is true of that concept of the tetragrammaton and the Abrahamic kind of point of view. And I think that's the same thing with people, like they don't want to express these things. And that's kind of what's being faced now, in my opinion. And I'm a little bit passionate about this point of view. And the reason I am is because I think a lot of practitioners, left hand, right hand path, tend to lose their balance because they chased over the elemental degrees. They chased over, and to me, that elemental degrees doesn't necessarily just mean you're working with fire or water from a magical point of view, but you're looking at those 4 archetypes within yourself: the king, magician, warrior, lover archetype. You're looking at your attachment wounds. If you're, disconnected, or if you're anxious, and you're looking at that healing component. And if a person's carrying the bias, the old narratives, and they haven't gone in to do the work to release themselves from it, they're still stuck there. And I think this is such a essential time. And I think those are the ones that are going to have the greatest difficulty in the time ahead. It's the ones that can abstractly look at these things as an occult scientist, so to speak, as literally somebody that takes these factors, and you're looking at them from a pattern point of view. And out of that, the religiosity is born, the art is born, instead of the other way around, which I think is an essential kind of frame. What's your view on that? What's your view on tactically and emotionally kind of going through this transition that is ahead? And what are some blockers that somebody might be stuck with?
So the biggest thing that one can do is detach. Buddha talked about this, and his basic view was simply that you see the emotions that come through you as a river. So you watch it, you see how it makes you feel,
Yeah.
but you remind yourself you're just an observer. So you experience it, but you don't get caught up in it. And with June in particular, that's a major theme.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of people get upset during Mercury retrogrades because their car breaks down, or they got computer issues, or whatever the case may be. They get so caught up in being upset about it and playing the victim mentality that they forget that there's a good chance it's their own fault. I had without getting into a very colorful story, I had a computer shoot craps on me during a Mercury retrograde, and I thought it was a monitor issue, but it turned out to be a motherboard issue.
Fun times.
And I lost, it was my business computer. So I lost major work.
Damn.
And what I did was I reminded myself, well, these warning signs had been here. It was my own fault I didn't address it. I can't get upset that this happened. I had been putting it off. That takes a certain level of humility that most people do not use during a Mercury retrograde. That example can be applied to this whole month of June. When these things come up, realize either you've neglected it or you've damaged it and now it's come home to roost. You are involved. You're not detached and disassociated from it.
I think what you're touching on there is such an important idea, and one that's very easily misunderstood, especially in how esoteric some people can get around these things, because, it's not me. It's something that I've watched a lot in the forums. It's not me, it's a curse. Somebody's cursed me, or it's bad spirits, or it's this, or it's that. And I'm not saying that it's not, I'm not saying there's not the possibility of it, but I am saying that if a practitioner is skilled enough to have done that and experienced enough to have done, you must have done something serious to just generally upset somebody with that ability. Okay.
Right?
Firstly, you weren't a random hack. Okay. So
right.
Firstly, you were probably a bit of an idiot or an asshole or something, which still means that there's some degree of yourself that needs to take responsibility of your role in this. And I'm not saying it's always the case. There could be another one. It's possible. I'm open to all kind of possibilities. But the main thing oftentimes that I find, and this is true in 85% of the situations, that the thing that is causing the chaos is self-sabotage at some level. Whether it's how, even when that energy comes into your place. So in our earlier discussions, I think we're still in our first interview, we were talking about the Lilith, somebody bringing in Lilith and then ending up a cuckold because of how their degree of maturity in relationship to that energy is. You're activating forces, but your unconscious narratives, your unconscious beliefs, your hidden patterns, they're all going to come up front. I still remember when I was very young, I was in my early teens and I was practicing LBRP religiously. I was practicing traditional Golden Dawn kind of system, but in that time, I was getting negative results from LBRP, not positive results. And it wasn't because of the ritual necessarily, but it was because my unconscious anchoring to a pentagram was still influenced by pop culture, to a degree. And indirectly, I was materializing that. And it was only when I broke through that the ritual started working for me, and I got the technique. And then I was free enough to rework the technique because I understood the principles behind it, and I could apply it to whatever pantheon made sense to me. But I think the same thing comes up here. And I love how David Goggins talks about it. You know, when he talks about the accountability mirror, when he was fat, he wouldn't go over to the mirror and go like, oh, you know, you're a bit pudgy, you know, you're fat. You know, he's like, you're fat, you're overweight, you're lazy, you know. And there's another example by Tony Robbins where a woman comes very inspired after a talk to him, and she says, you know, Tony, you've inspired me. I'm going to go home, I'm going to get the best trainer money can buy, I'm going to get the best outfit, best bike, best this. And he said to her, madam, with all due respect, you do not need the best trainer money can buy. You do not need the best equipment. You need a big man with a whip behind you screaming, run. that level of delusion, you know, that we take.
Totally. And that's what this month is going to be about, is exposing anything like that.
Yes. So this is a time to be honest. You know, this is a time to be
exactly honest, humble, open to seeing other perspectives.
Yes.
You know, everybody is both angel and devil, both in their own lives. And if you hear stories from other people, you'll alternatively play the role of an angel or a demon, depending on the person and your role in their life.
That's so true. That is
so
so
seeing
true.
all of these things and integrating them into where you are now and where you're going is a major lesson for June.
That's because that's such a core idea, because that also says that that's not a permanent thing. You know, people's perspectives of you are based upon their current emotional state. And the same thing as well, you seeing these parts of yourself that are not pretty, but need to be owned. You need, you know, look in that mirror, you look at where you're maybe being lazy. You're not putting in the hours that you should be putting, you know, and you need to be honest about this so that you can face it and come over with the change and realize that if you may be fat right now, or you may be lazy right now, or maybe you're unloved, you know, whatever it is, you're alone. That's not a permanent state. It's not a death sentence. It's just where you're currently at. And as long as you're denying it, you can't do anything about it. You also can't measure it, right? I mean, I can tell myself magically, and this is what a lot of magicians do. You know, I'm the powerful warlock of time. But you know, your work is never on time. You know, your bills are never on time. Right. We got to find that balance. So there's quite a lot. So I mean, we've got solstice coming up. We've got the retrograde. We've got a couple of retrogrades. When does that kind of finish out? Are we going to see any of that kind of balancing out at the end of the month, or are we just in for some hard inner work and outer work this month?
So the good news is the month ends with Mercury direct. Nice. So the Mercury retrograde is over right around solstice. Jupiter goes retrograde at the beginning of the month, but it and Saturn are going to be retrograde for the next several months. Okay. And the reason that's important is that it means that the energy is going to be less intense than it is during a Mercury retrograde. So even though we're talking about these things, especially when it comes to Jupiter and Saturn, which are social planets, these are going to play out until September or October-ish.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, Jupiter has a lot to do with our kind of leadership. You know, it has a lot to do with even career and finances to a certain degree. Saturn is very much that hidden dark shadow self in many ways, that inner initiation. Am I right in my interpretation by saying that with us kind of getting into this, we're going to go through this month getting clear upon our own personal delusions and getting a bit more realistically on timings and projects and our own capacity and things like that. And we're going to get a bit rid of that inflated ego mindset, but not at the point of being negative, but being to the point of going, I have to practically now work on forwarding the bottom line in my business, in my family, however I'm leading my campaign, my project, whatever it is. And the thing that's going to go hand in hand with that is my own shadow issues, so to speak.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And, part of this too is remembering just the basic principles of Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is expansion, Saturn is contraction.
Ooh. Oh,
So it's harmonizing the two internally.
okay.
And this kind of ties into something you said earlier. One of the keys to prosperity that's written about a lot is the first step to achieving prosperity is to limit yourself.
Mm.
You don't get prosperous till you create a budget.
Mm.
And then you have to live within those means. And a
Yes.
lot of people think prosperity in this case is money, but it can also be spiritual prosperity.
Yes. Yes.
So now is a time for constriction. Now is a time for shaking things up and breaking them down to their bare essence and their core kernel
Mm. This
and
is
harmonizing within yourself. Okay, here I'll be restrictive now, but here I'll be expansive. Or I was expansive last week. Now it's time to be restrictive this week.
so. One of the things that I'm also seeing is, especially with business, if I look at what, and it doesn't necessarily have to be business. Again, Jupiter can be in the relationship. I can have a grander vision for, maybe we want to have family. Maybe there's other things that I want to kind of expand. Maybe it's a community that I want to build or something like that. And I mean, the vision may be grand, and in typical Jupiterian style, almost overwhelming, like so grand, so grandiose. And the Saturnal energy is kind of coming in and go like, okay, that's great. Let's be practical. What are we gonna like put away for now? We can still kind of write that in DevOps, so to speak. And then what are the piece by piece things that you can actually do? And then also, because Mercury is kind of coming out of the retrograde and moving into straight, we might be in a position where we may be able to see, if we're objective ourselves, and we're kind of following this pattern that we're getting for this month ahead of us, to realize why we might not be taking action, upon those
Right.
things.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of that, you touched on it, but let's elaborate for a moment. Part of that is saying, okay, I want this big Jupiterian thing.
Mm.
You got to break down the steps, but you also have to be comfortable with yourself saying, I'm going to play the necessary game to get there.
Yes. Yes.
Because some people want the prize and they do see the steps. They just don't want to take the steps because they think it goes against their core beliefs or their core code or their core values.
Mm.
Sometimes you got to give an inch to take a mile.
Mm. Okay.
This comes up in readings a lot with me, with a lot of people. They'll say, well, I want a 2-story house with a white picket fence, 2.5 children, a couple of cars in the garage. And my response is, well, unless you have some crazy ass idea that's going to make you a lot of money, think about the people that have those things. Think about how they got there. And they probably got there by having a job Monday through Friday, billed as 8 a.m. till 5, although it probably goes 8 a.m. till 7. And you do that for years on end.
I mean,
So unless you're willing to pay that price, you're not going to have that goal.
that's a goal. I think because a lot of people are so easily deluded because of internet marketing, and I'm not just talking by other occultists, but by everybody. Because again, that's the way that we sell, right? I mean, we sell by offering you a quick way out of your pain and into a perceived pleasure, and we make it seem, and that's what marketing does. I mean, it's not necessarily whether it's ethical or not, it's a different kind of discussion, and we're very quickly starting to see the impact of that ethics in terms of long-term business and sustainability. But the problem is, we now have almost even a generation that's born on this quick fix, this instant gratification psychology, and not realizing the long-term damage that causes. Again, I'm not a fan of Grant Cardone myself. But there's been one point of his that I did agree with, where he was talking about one of his wealth building strategies that a lot of people don't realize is that for quite a number of years, he was living like absolute crap because he was living the multiple jobs, doing the everything, not spending any of his money because he had the specific direction that he wanted to invest it. And you see that often, like many people that do make it, they have a normal career. And then on top of that, they wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning to work on their dream business until the things can be balanced. Now, sure, some people may be in a position where they can't cut everything off, but if you have a family, if you have bills and existing responsibility, that may not be your situation. And to just think it's going to change is not realistic. And I've seen that, like when you work with Spirit will work with you where you are at in terms of what's possible. Or I've had communications with Spirit where I've had situations, I'm not saying this doesn't happen, where they've come in and they've literally given the opportunity, but they've given opportunities that I was primed for. I had the skill set, or I had the resources that would make me be able to capitalize on those. And that, has given me opportunities many other people didn't have because they weren't necessarily practicing it. But at the same time, there would be grander things that I'd wanted for my life, and they would come to me with the vision. And it still was a case of, for me to get that, not only meant I had to work, but I had to change myself. And I had to go through that personal alchemy. It's a hectic one. It's an important one. And I think a lot of people that haven't had, kind of the long journey to, I was looking at a lot of these new magicians that talk about kind of like eclectically approaching their magic. And I think it's great being able to take a piece of traditions. But a lot of these old initiatory and progression systems were designed to help you with this. They were initially, when they were done right, again, even religion, if it was done right, it would have achieved the goal. But in most cases, many practitioners of religion fail to see that actual progression line because they don't have it. But once we go through that transmutation of the identity, that's where we become spiritually matured in order to have that outcome realized. We're almost out of time for today. There's two things though I want to kind of ask before we kind of end one. One is just, I want to make sure that we've covered everything for the month, but I'm going to save that one for last. The one I want to kind of just hit first is in the concept of the king, magician, warrior, lover, and this is something spoken about very much in the male developmental movement. But in all honesty, these are Jungian archetypes. They fit just as easily across to the female. We just replace the king with a queen, or we just replace that principle with sovereign, and there are still the elements. But it's a philosophy that there is a decision, there is a cut off from limited weak you to infinite you, or to mature you. There has to be that transition. For many of us, this was an initiation. It wasn't ritual. Whether that initiation was inside of a temple or was the initiation of life, where you made that transition, where you lost family members, where you had to do things on your own, where your financial situation just, not everyone necessarily has that. Somebody may live in today's time where they're just in such an environment where they actually don't have to, they're not pushed into a situation like that, but they are suffering emotionally or spiritually because of never having that dimension of themselves. What is some advice for someone like that? How can they kind of jumpstart that initiation in themselves?
Well, the first thing is to, number one, don't compare your path to others.
Okay.
Except that you are in a unique situation. And that person may look around at their life and say, well, it's not that unique. Most of my friends are this way. But I assure you that in the grander scheme of 7 billion people on the planet, it's a small percentage.
Yes.
So don't compare yourself to others. You're not walking a mile in their shoes, you're walking a mile in yours. And the second thing is the confidence builder.
Okay.
You got this. It's that simple. Don't doubt yourself. Every failure is simply deferred success. The difference between a student and a master is a master has attempted more times than the student has succeeded.
Yes. Yes. Still a
If you
golf man.
remember those three things, you'll be fine. It may take a while to get to where you want to go. You might have a rocky initiatory experience, but you are going to get there because you're grounded in yourself. You're staying in your lane by not comparing yourself to others. And you're remembering that life is a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a great one, because again, like, not every map can be the direction, can lead to the destination that you're after. And the only thing worth comparing is the thing that you've been. If you're going to be competing against something, compete against who you were yesterday. And that's a progressive thing.
Exactly. And that's a big problem right now with social media, because you can look at somebody's pictures on their Facebook page that are 7 years old and think that they are the same person now that they were 7 years ago.
Yes.
That's a problem.
Yes, exactly. And I'm in digital as well as a business, and I know clients that come to us they pay a lot of money for us to produce a lifestyle for them around their brand and their idea. That's where a lot of those pictures and a lot of those concepts come from. And a lot of people look at that and they make the mistake that thinks that should be the norm. In many cases, that's not a life that you want to have as the norm, because it's painful. It's a lot of work. It's not really as fulfilling as it looks. It's
Exactly.
yeah.
It's a product that's sold.
Exactly. And that's the thing to recognize. You're being sold. To me, being a witch, being a magician, being a practitioner means you've got a choice to make at all points. You're either at the effect of other people's constant spell casting. And I mean, all marketing is spell casting. All online communication is spell casting. A Bugatti is a sigil, for most people. The reason we buy certain jeans and certain, because they're sigils. They represent certain states. And all that's happening with people that are influencers, quote unquote, is they are experienced. They may not call themselves witches, they may not call themselves practitioners, but from a practical point of view, that's what they are. They're utilizing those things. So if you have a choice. You either are being affected by these, or you are selling a more powerful spell. And you're casting out a more powerful thing. And again, you're not going to get there unless your identity is congruent with it. And I think that's where a lot of what we've spoken about kind of leads you into the piece. Bill, as we finish up today's session, is there anything we missed? You want to give us a kind of like 2-minute recap on the month ahead, and maybe some closing thoughts?
Basically, with all this Gemini, Cancer, Leo influences going on for the month, number one, keep it lighthearted. Number two, remember this too shall pass. Just roll with it. Let the universe talk to you and be humble enough to listen.
A difficult lesson for many people to learn, but one that can't be avoided any longer. Bill,
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time today. I'm excited about our episode next month. For those of you that don't know, Bill's amazing tomb of work on Enochian magic will be coming out through Become a Living God. There is already like a little bit of an intro trailer to the sales page. You can kind of pre-order, I believe, at the moment. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and you can go to the landing page on becomealiving.com, and you can sign up to get the newsletter that we'll send out. But also, you get a free chapter so you can see if you like the book before you buy it. And I chose chapter 1 because there's so much on Enochian. You should be able to tell after that first chapter whether or not it's for you.
Yes, yes. That's /Enochian, but I'll make sure the links are in the description. We're going to be deep diving a bit into that book along with next month's kind of episode. And that'll be on the 30th of June. Just so you're ready, you can start your new July month with great update. I'm personally going through that book at the moment. There's some astonishing ideas. You challenge a lot of conventional, traditional thinking. And I think a lot of people, there will be quite a couple of upset people. But again, science evolves one dead scientist at a time, right? So,
Exactly.
So does magic. Okay, Bill, thanks so much. And I'll see you next month.
I've always felt a little different, a little uneasy between regular folk, a bit of a dreamer, a lost cause, a little non-ordinary, some would say. I think I've always just been this way. My mother said I was special, my father thought I should be feared. But I knew that witchcraft coursed through my veins the first time I tasted the lips of the goddess inside the rain. Yes, I'm a witch, it's true. And sure, we are the ones who believe in the beauty of nature, who believe in the things science, absent of art, cannot explain, who instead of religion would have romance. And sure, you may think we have lost our way, when in the world of predictable things we have such unfamiliar things that we would like to say. But maybe, in a world so cold and alone, a little unfamiliar is exactly what is needed to show us the way home.
Hey family, it's Adam Knox here. Thanks for supporting this podcast and, these ideas. I really appreciate free thinkers, like yourselves, that are willing to challenge conventional norms and think for themselves and take on new challenges and look at new ideas. And as such, I want to say that if you haven't yet, if you are looking at ways to improve your knowledge over the entire field and you're looking at a regular feed of ideas and concepts to keep improving yourself, I'd like to invite you to sign up at the Cult of You. All my teachings and all my ideas are there for only $19 a month, and every month I bring you a completely new section of some of the most cutting ideas, and I'm constantly adding to that. So I'm constantly reviewing and adding more knowledge as I gain them. And you'll see a lot of the interviews and a lot of things that I do extend on some of the subjects that I cover inside of those areas. I do take quite a bit of effort to make sure that the filming is also quite good and to give you not just a demonstration of rituals, but also talk you through the psychology behind them so that you're empowered to do them. And I cover every subject under the sun, from science to art to magic to all the different systems out there, from the Golden Dawn to the Western traditions to the left-hand path traditions. We discuss technology and technomancy. We discuss sex magic and seduction. We discuss so much more, from purely the mental aspects to how do you deal with the darkness when it comes up, as well as how do you take those things into business and into your romantic life, as well as what are the keys to make your magic work, as well as to unlock different degrees of spirituality. So if you haven't yet, please consider signing up at the Cult of You, and you'll be able to send me a mail and message there, and I'll be there to help you personally through mail correspondence and chat you and guide you through the entire process. And if you make it through the first year of the entire cycle and you graduate to the second year of the program, you're able to have direct sessions with myself and some of the members of my temple. And I look forward to helping you whether you go that route or not. Please keep enjoying these podcasts. Please share them with people that you think they're going to find value in them. Like and subscribe to the show. And please send me your messages to info@thecult-of-you. I would love to hear what are things that are important to you. What are ideas and concepts that this raised? Maybe this inspired you. Maybe this made sense to you. Maybe this opened up something. I'd love to hear that. Please talk to me and please share with me. Write in the comments and give me your ideas and concepts. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, if you're only watching this on the YouTube channel, please head on over to Spotify and do subscribe. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, go check us out on YouTube. But please share these ideas and these concepts
and let's have a conversation. I'd love to hear from you. That's it for me. I'm Adam Knox. This is The Cult of You, and remember, live deliciously.